Ochoyo sambo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngo da pelge drolor tsampe tse parache panden lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajradara sumati munisha sane kar Uta vardanya shri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum hum Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Siddhi Hum Hum Om Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradara Sumati Munishas Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Dagi Sundan Dagi Nga Ma Kyuke Tugdan Dagi Tön Yerme Chiktu Chingi Yolo Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Svoha Sashipuki Chushimeto Tamare Rabling Shi Nide Gempadi Sange Shintu Mikte Ulwarki Chanam la chancho pardo dani kyapso chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchira sange druparasho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Namo yalha ye keda ludane jinke drubundanda mi kenam dan druba kunge dranam chitsampa tamche ketu dagi chuten.
Let's imagine a plot of land. but imagine that we were actually looking at the soil, like stratified. So we have the different levels, the different layers. So the first one is really quite deep and not very permeable, a little bit. And then there's another thinner layer of another material, let's say. And then there's the solid basis, another layer. So what happens is the stability of what is above reflects what's underneath. If it all collapses underneath, then what's on top is going to collapse too. So to water what is underneath, we need to start watering above. But 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 you need to actually water a lot, little by little. The water comes down. You need a lot of time. If you put just a little bit of water, it'll evaporate first, and it won't go all the way down. So to get the water all the way down, you need to constantly, continuously water regularly. What's another way to get water to the depth quickly? You just make a hole. Make a hole, and then you get to the deepest layer, and then you add water. You can add. So you need to dig a hole to the lowest level, and then you add water. Similarly, we have 3 mental and physical levels. We have a first level, so-called coarse or gross. And in just a few words, it's the conscious mind. It's the minds that perceive the 6 senses, the state of the mind that perceives what we hear, what we see, what we touch, etc., etc., and also our emotions manifested, what is present, manifested, that we can consider that gross or coarse. And then we also have a subtle mind. The subtle mind, trying to put it into simple terms, we could say that it's all the aspects of our mind that are present but not manifest. For example, I can tell you that I'm not angry right now, but this doesn't mean that I don't have anger. So the anger that I have, but in this present moment is not manifest, just like the generosity I have, or the gratitude I have, that is maybe not actually manifest. Where is it? It's in the subtle mind, but nothing can manifest in the gross mind if it doesn't have a correspondent in the subtle mind. And then we have a very subtle mind, which is a state where there's not the emotional part, there's not the cognitive part, but it's a state where there are only the imprints of our habits, of our conditionings, of our emotions, as if they were really the imprints. If we think about a plant, we have the seed, the potential that can sprout and become a tree. So it would be like the seed. So as we live our lives, everything that we experience on a superficial, coarse level, that influences and gradually makes a change to that second layer, that subtle level. But what happens on a subtle level, the stronger and deeper experience is, the deeper the imprints are, the deeper the predispositions are. Are you following up to here? Now there's a fundamental concept, especially in Vajrayana Buddhism, which is we are not able to have two thoughts, conceptual or emotional, that are directly opposite each other at the same time. The example I always give is we're not able to think I like water and I don't like water at the same time. Try. Try. I like and I don't like of the exact same thing. We can go quickly from one to the next. I like it, now I don't like it anymore. I could say I like the temperature, but I don't like the taste. I like one aspect, but I don't like another. But those are two different aspects. So one thing is the water's temperature, is something else the taste of the water, right? But the same object, we're not able to have the two directly opposing ideas or thoughts. So if we want to eliminate a certain emotion, thought, or state, a mental state, the way to do it is not by trying to go against it, but putting the energy in its direct antidote, its direct opposite. So if I feel miserliness, I can't feel generosity. If I feel generosity, I can't feel miserliness at the same time. But they are feelings that are directly opposite each other. So if I generate a certain mental state on a gross level, I I will try to oppose it on a gross level. If I generate a feeling on a subtle level, a deeper, then I need to oppose its opposite on a subtle level, and to eliminate a certain state at a very subtle level, I need to generate its opposite on a very subtle level. So changing the mind on a gross level is good, is fine, but it's not that useful in the sense that the changes that we make on a gross level, if we're not able to uphold them so that they can then make a deeper change. So if we make changes on a course level, but we don't allow those changes to stay for a certain amount of time so that they can permeate and go deeper, when we die, ciao, goodbye. Because when we die, what continues from one life to the next? The very subtle mind, the imprints, the predispositions that one brings with oneself, but not only from one life to another, also during this lifetime. This is one of the most important aspects. So one of our highest objectives of our practice is not about changing superficial aspects, which is important, but as a final objective, we want to transform our being on a subtle level, but mostly on a very subtle level. Ideally, we should generate those states of consciousness, those inner states that oppose inner states that generate suffering. In just a few words, we should generate love and compassion, the so-called bodhicitta, and wisdom. These are the two main antidotes that we need to generate. But normally the process is, first I generate it on a gross course level, many years, little by little. I think more and more about it on a conceptual level, and that conceptual level brings a gradual experience that's deeper and deeper until I'm able little by little to create deeper imprints, and then one life after the next, as Buddha Shakyamuni um, Buddha Shakyamuni said, in 3 eons one concludes the path. Let's remember that time is very relative. It's something, sincerely speaking, when I saw that it said that the path, that one needs 3 eons from the time of having developed renunciation. I'm not sure how many of us have actually even begun the path. That's another topic. It's actually something very positive because it means that it's possible to walk slowly and reach our objective. It's not that you have to do it quickly or you can't do it at all. So it's a path that little by little, everyone the respecting the length of one's own legs, one walks the path without the hurry of getting there. In Tantra, in Vajrayana, what happens is one starts looking around oneself and one sees the level of suffering of beings and generates a very strong feeling of wanting to help others. But to help them, first of all, I need to do it myself. Because when we look at the world around us, what's the main cause of problems? Look at wars, for example. Heavy. The various violent conflicts, hunger, so many sicknesses that exist in the world. What are they caused by? Let's start with war. What's the primary cause of war? It's the egocentric mind of human beings. This obsessive, the obsession with the I and the my, the inability to see others, actually deeply ignorance. But how can I help you overcome your selfishness and reach a state of altruism when I myself am in the middle of this egocentric mind? That's why one needs to say, I need to get out of this cycle of suffering. I need to really develop my qualities to their mental, to their maximum potential. I need to get to a state where then I can help others reach a state of more balance and peace. There is no other way. But I don't want to wait 3 eons. Not because it's difficult for me, but because the suffering around me is so much that I want to help the best way I can as quickly as possibly. Like at the beginning of the Guru Puja, where there's the part that says Nyurva Nyurva. Nyurva Nyurma means quickly, quickly. May I quickly, quickly reach Buddhahood. At this point, we need to find a means to get there. Find a quick, a fast vehicle, because walking takes time, and in Vajrayana Buddhism there is a quicker vehicle, which is the process of generating a virtuous state of mind as an antidote, and then do that, and then dig that hole, as we said before, where we go from the gross mind to the subtle mind to the very subtle mind, and then we, like water that we bring that state of consciousness to that very subtle level. What is the vehicle that can bring us there? Bliss. Bliss, this state of pleasure, joy, enjoyment, is a state that naturally brings one to a coarse, to a more subtle state. And if you direct it in the correct way, one can actually get to a very subtle level. Experiencing subtle states of consciousness in and of themselves is nothing special. Uh, you know, let's say we become experts in digging holes, but instead of putting water, we put polluted products. What effect are we bringing? It's nothing positive. So what happens when, for reasons often physical, when the gross body for some reason is no longer able to uphold itself and the subtle energies absorb in the central channel, and in that moment the coarse body loses strength and the more subtle parts show up more clearly. And then at a certain point, when this absorption continues, the more subtle winds lose strength, and then the very subtle aspect self manifests. This happens during the process of death. The last moment of death, what happens naturally is that little by little the organs stop functioning. This so-called the prana, the subtle energy winds start to absorb into the central channel. One loses contact with the five senses, and the gross body little by little stops, and the gross mind stops working too, until the subtle mind becomes more self-evident, and then the subtle body stops working, and the very subtle mind becomes self-evident. Like, for example, if there's a strong sound and also um, very soft sounds, if the loud noises stop, then we're able to hear the quieter sounds. And when those quiet sounds stop, we can hear those that are even softer. So this our mind has a special characteristic. The more the sensory object of perception is coarse, less sensitive become um, le- less l- less sensitive is our sense of perception, and vice versa. This happens with touch, with hearing, with taste, with smell, with seeing, and even with the mind itself. The more inner silence we have, the fewer distractions we have, etc., then little by little we become more sensitive in our perceptions. So, one important characteristic is when this dissolution comes, this process where the coarse mind loses strength together with the coarse body, and the subtle ones manifest, and the direction that the subtle mind and body take, sorry, the direction that the subtle mind takes is the last thought that the coarse mind had. For example, so I dig a hole, and what I put inside is the last thought of the coarse gross mind. So if I enter a deeper state of consciousness with an inner state of attachment and hatred, what will I familiarize myself on a deeper level? Attachment and hatred. Because when the coarse mind stops, the subtle mind takes that direction. And then when the subtle mind stops, the very subtle mind takes that direction. You can, if you're able to enter to a more subtle state of consciousness with feelings of love, wisdom, compassion, then that's what I'm going to familiarize myself with on a deeper level. That's why bringing ourselves to a state of deeper consciousness for in and of itself is nothing special or positive. During our lifetime, it's said that there are three main, and maybe possibly four, but naturally three moments where this process of dissolution from a coarse, subtle, and very subtle level happens. The strongest is during our death. So that's why it's said that in at the time of death, the inner state in which the person dies is said that's very important because it's the direction that the mind follows on a subtle level and on a very subtle level. It's that last state of the mind or the emotion. Then there are other two moments during our lifetime where naturally this process happens on a much quicker and lighter way. One is during sleep, and one is during orgasm. These are moments where this absorb these the absorption of the winds happen from a gross to a subtle to a very to a subtle level. I mean, we all sleep, right? I mean, these are natural processes. The process in and of itself, as I said it before, this process of absorption is nothing special. It's important. It depends on what we on what comes with it. So it's also possible to induce these processes during meditation, where where the winds can absorb. We can induce a deeper state of consciousness through meditation. It's not natural or spontaneous, but it is possible. So, what's the key here? First of all, generate that inner state that we want to familiarize ourselves with later on a more subtle level. So we call it the absolute bodhicitta. It's a union of a feeling of altruism, love, and compassion with which we realize the ultimate nature of self and phenomenon. Just in a few words, without getting into too many details. This is just an introduction to get to the purification of the elements. So what happens in Vajrayana Buddhism? The tool that allows us to bring this state of love, compassion, and wisdom that we generate, what allows us to take that from a coarse level to a subtle and then a very subtle level, is this state of bliss, Dewa Chempo, Mahasukha. That is our tool. This inner state of great pleasure, enjoyment. This state is described in an ordinary way. One can get close to it, but it's still far. It would be orgasm, the experience of orgasm. It's said that this state of bliss that is possible to generate, this actually goes much beyond this. I remember once we were on retreat here in Albagnano, and at a certain point, someone who was present on retreat was doing the mantra, etc. And after the session, came to me and said, Lama, I have to tell you something. I'm a little bit uneasy about this. Was a little bit ashamed. No, I was doing the mantra. At a certain point, I felt a heat that was just taking me. It was like a huge orgasm that was never ending, and I was reciting the mantras, but I wasn't understanding anything in this great state of pleasure that was really overwhelming every part of my body, that lasted a long time. This is when we talk about the bliss in a meditative state, it's something possible. Lama Tsongkhapa described, he said that one of the necessary conditions to be able to generate bliss as a tool, first of all, one needs to not have attachment to pleasure itself. And actually, there's that moment he presents a hypothetical question saying, how can you generate great bliss if you're not attached to bliss? And Lama Tsongkhapa answers his same question. It's like someone who's not attached to food but looks for food when he's hungry. In other words, one doesn't live bliss and pleasure as an objective in and of itself, but as a means. When we experience a moment of bliss, of pleasure, even on an ordinary way, with attachment to the pleasure, what state of consciousness is generated at that moment? Attachment and unselfishness. If we really say how things are, very often when we use sexual energy, when one enters into a state of sexual pleasure and enjoyment, one does it. Do they do it for altruistic reasons or is it a selfish? They do it for selfish reasons. It's mostly selfish. It's my pleasure. So in this case, what is the state that one should familiarize himself with? It depending on the state of pleasure that one can generate. There's an absorption that is very, very brief, and one is familiarizing oneself with that mental state of selfishness and attachment. In Vajrayana Buddhism, very often you'll hear this term, the union of bliss and emptiness. The union of bliss and emptiness is where emptiness, or rather the wisdom, the mental state that realizes the nature of everything, is it's the mental state that we want to generate on a subtle and very subtle level. And the bliss is the means that brings that wisdom to from a coarse to a very subtle to coarse subtle to a very subtle level. I know that everything that we're saying can seem very, very far for many of you, but it's important to understand a little bit in the practice that we do, and in this case the practice of self-healing, this method, the direction that it goes, to understand this aspect too. So what happens is the part of the development of the correct view of reality, wisdom, is exactly the same as in the sutra and philosophy. It's not that it changes in Tantra, but one generates that state of understanding of the correct view of reality, and then one takes it from a coarse level to a subtle level, and a very subtle level, through the development of great bliss as the vehicle, as the means, the tool. Is that clear? It's that hole that we dug that to get to a deeper level of consciousness. Now to do this, even when we, for example, read the commentary of Guru Samadra, this important tantric process, it's divided into three parts. How to generate bliss, how to generate the correct view of reality, how to unite the two. In the practice of self-healing, right at the beginning of the practice, there's the moment where we generate bliss. And this moment is called the purification of the elements. So what happens here? We're simulating initially with visualization, imagining the physical, subtle process that could happen to generate that inner state of bliss, of pleasure. The visualization in itself is based on the purification of space element. Space is what allows the other elements to interact among them. And then we purify first the wind. So imagine that the winds come from above and below towards the secret chakra. They enter into the central channel, and at that point we put our attention on our navel, where the fire increases, it grows. If, for example, if we do this practice and we concentrate well on the wind, and we do the vis breathing as we've been doing on this abdominal breathing, and we're holding the air under the navel, and it's the whole process, but mostly when we hold the air, if we can focus mostly on the navel and the fire that is little by little growing, and we hold our breath even, and pulling up our lower muscles. If you do it well, then naturally you will create inner heat. It's natural. So the visualization is the wind absorbs into the central channel, the fire grows, that heat goes up, 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 purifying the earth at our heart. Imagine the heat that goes up to the heart. It gets to our throat chakra where the water element is. The water heats up. Imagine this water starts to bubble, and it evaporates. It doesn't dry up. The water that evaporates gets to our crown chakra where it melts this so-called white bodhicitta. The white bodhicitta is a part of our subtle body. It's an energetic part, but it also has a physical part. It's the part that we received from our father. It's the male energy of our father. There's a female energy from our mother. So the white bodhicitta is said to reside mostly in the crown chakra, and the red bodhicitta at our secret chakra. So this hot water that's evaporating is melting the white bodhicitta, and it melts and descends, generates great bliss. So we visualize within the central channel this nectar that comes down, and in every chakra. So for example, the 32 channels of our crown, the nectar goes into every of every one of the channels, the 16 channels of our throat, then at our heart, the nectar enters in the 8 channels of our heart, and the 64 channels at our navel, and the 32 channels of our secret chakra. At that point, it gets to the 72,000 channels within our body, filling up our body completely and generating this sense of bliss. In English, is absolutely, we can say, overwhelming. In Italian is, well, it's overwhelming. It's an overwhelming experience. That it just takes, there's no space for anything else. It is such a strong experience that there's no space for anything else. So first of all, one generates that state of bliss. So the purification of the elements, there are 2 levels. There's one superficial level where we create harmony among the elements, and we imagine anything impure in our elements or non-harmonious, it's all eliminated, and there's balance and harmony among our elements. But on a deeper level, we're generating more bliss using natural processes to generate this great bliss. We first begin by imagining, to then little by little with breathing techniques, with development of meditation techniques, with the accumulation of merit, then this can go from being something just visualized to something that actually happens. But in the sadhana of Yamantaka, for example, it's done at the beginning of the practice in what we call the inner offering. So there's this object which is in the form of a kapala. Here I have one. This object here. This object is made, let's see if you're able to see, there are 3 parts underneath. it's like a crescent moon that represents wind, and then there's the triangle that represents the fire element, and then there's a skull cup. Where's the white bodhicitta in the head? How do you melt it? The wind that blows and the fire that grows. So this is directly related to this. The objective here is to generate bliss. So now, without getting into too many details, we concentrate on the practice of self-healing, and in this process we imagine that we're generating an inner feeling of bliss, joy, pleasure. Pabonka Rinpoche in the commentary of Tara Chittamani, he describes this moment of the practice saying, in this moment, for beginners, try to remember one of the strongest memories of bliss and pleasure, of joy that you've ever had, and recall that experience. Try to regenerate that state of pleasure through that memory that you have. So now in that moment, when we do A Yam Ram Lam Bam, and even the order, A is space. It creates the basis. Yam is wind at our secret chakra. Ram is the fire at our navel. Lam at our is the earth at our heart, and Bam at our throat. When we do Shuddha Soha, then we do a different order. We go from the crown down, because first we create space at the crown, and then the wind blows, the fire grows, the earth heats up, the water evaporates, it melts, melts the bodhicitta, it melts the white bodhicitta and comes down. Shuddha Soha, as it's coming down, that state of bliss is cleaning every subtle energy channel, so purifying the body on a coarse but also on a subtle level, because these states of consciousness clean our subtle energy channels. So in this moment, we try to concentrate on something that recalls this state of bliss, this state of pleasure, of enjoyment, and try to let go so that we can familiarize ourselves with states of pleasure. This one, it's not the main function, but it also has the function of familiarizing ourselves with joy. The more you feel it, the more familiarity you create. The whole practice from the beginning to the end actually is, if done on a deeper level, like Pro 2, on an advanced level, like super advanced level, during the entire practice, one should maintain this bliss, this feeling of bliss, and the awareness of emptiness. These two things this so-called union of bliss and emptiness should be present throughout the entire practice, where the vehicle is bliss. What is taken in that vehicle is the wisdom that realizes the nature of all phenomena. So we're not going to talk about that now, but what happens is, in other words, it's also said that bliss is a mental state. Emptiness is the object of perception of that mind, of that mental state. It's like if I play the singing bowl, for example, you can all hear the sound of the singing bowl, but we can hear it with a state of joy, or with a state of sadness, or a state of anger. We can have different states with which we perceive the singing bowl sound. So the inner state is bliss, and the object itself is emptiness. And this is called the union of bliss and emptiness. This is something that in Tantra is repeated again and again because it's very important. And the farther you go along the path, the more you understand. Tomorrow we'll talk more about emptiness. So today bliss and tomorrow emptiness, to understand better this union of the two. But this instrument, this tool is this hole that we've dug that allows us to bring it to a deeper state. So when we begin the practice, we should try to create this sense of bliss and maintain it during the entire practice. There are different sadhanas, practices that remind us of the bliss again and again. In Yamataka, for example, there's the inner offering. Orishti vititana humpe oma ahum. What are we generating? Bliss. You're offering bliss. You're generating bliss. Every 2 for 3, you're generating and offering bliss. It should be a state that is present along the entire path, hopefully during your whole life, but at least during your meditation. Here we're talking about advanced practices. But so the purification of the elements is a preliminary practice where so on one level we're bringing harmony and balance to our elements, but on a deeper level we are activating this process of the wind that is blowing, the fire that's growing. That's this inner heat that is growing within, heating up the earth, and the evaporating the water, melting the white bodhicitta that comes down also as a cooling pleasure, and activating the 16 blisses, 4 times 4. So let's try the 16 joys. Let's try to maintain this joy, to activate it, generate it, and maintain it. As I said before, it's also the preparation for what comes at the end of the practice, which is called the 4 empowerments. There's the secret and the wisdom. Sorry, the first one is the vase empowerment, and then the secret empowerment, wisdom, and then the name empowerment. There too, actually, again, we're generating bliss and bringing the consciousness to a deeper level. This bliss inseparable from wisdom. This as a method. This is what happens at the end of the practice too. I know that this is quite advanced, and maybe someone says, I don't understand anything. I get it. It's okay. But at the same time, these are subjects that we need, that if we don't create familiarity with, little by little, we'll never do it. So in these days, we're talking about self-healing, discussing various aspects of the practice. So when we get to the part of purification of the elements, we're not simply purifying the elements, we're actually transforming our body and mind. So the elements and the 5 aggregates from an impure to a pure state. This is what this represents. The same external symbolism here when we do practices, for example, a Yamantaka or Vajrayogini, within this Kapala, you visualize the 5 meats and the 5 nectars. The 5 meats and the 5 nectars are nothing other than symbolism that represents the 5 aggregates and the 5 elements. And then the wind blows the fire, and the fire increases, and all the impurities are eliminated, and with the Omahum, it becomes a pure nectar, and by experiencing that nectar, one experiences great bliss. So this symbolism shows us that when this process happens inside, this state of bliss purifies and transforms the body and the mind and our elements. So when we imagine this state of bliss that comes, because that the wind keeps blowing, the fire keeps burning, it's a process that continues. It's like it goes a while on for a while until the white bodhicitta melts, and then we focus only uh, on the bliss of coming down. So all any form of impurity, tension, etc., is completely eliminated, purified with this process. This is the meaning of this part of the purification. Now, on a deeper level, advanced level, this is the tool that is used to generate that state of love and wisdom on a deeper level and transform our being from a from a conceptual level to a deeper level. But first we need to generate wisdom, we need to generate the bliss, and then bring it to a deeper level of consciousness. It's important to remember also, because then it can happen that, for example, someone gets close to tantric techniques and there's the whole energetic aspect of it all, and can have specific energetic experiences, and it feels like you're doing amazing things. But if you have not generated renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of reality, then you you risk putting in dirt or something polluted instead of pure water into your hole. So first we need to focus on the three principal aspects of the path, the basis, to then be able to do the rest. So renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view of reality. Just wanted to remind you that sometimes these teachings, these techniques, they're kept secret because they can be very appealing, tantalizing. Tantalizing. Oh, techniques to control my energy, make me feel this and that. It really can inflate one's ego. But really, what are you doing if not use that to develop a deeper state of love and wisdom? I don't know if that's clear. So it's really important to remember these two things always go together. There's the basis of the three principal aspects of the path. That's why we all do the preliminary practices. We generate the correct motivation, love, and wisdom. Then we do the meditation. Tomorrow we'll talk about this meditation on on emptiness, the lack of inherent existence, and then we can generate bliss. Then that gives meaning. Otherwise, why would we generate such bliss? For what other purpose? So today we're going to conclude. There's something marvelous that Lama Michel Rinpoche gave us was this really taking aspects of Vajrayana practice, and he made them available to us so that we could understand something. Because, for example, a few years ago, I had given some explanations of the practice of Yamantaka for a couple days. And one day I explained the inner offering starting from what we talked about today. And that day, I finished the teachings in the morning. I went home. I had lunch together with Lama Ganchen, and there was also Geshe Lo Sampende, the abbot of Sharganden. And Geshe Lo Sampende had just come from Sharganden, where he had given the commentary of Yamataka, and we sat down for lunch, and Rinpoche asked me, "What did you explain today?" And I said, "Oh, Rinpoche, I explained the inner offering." He said, "What did you tell them? What did you say?" And so I started explaining what I had said. Obviously, these are this is also knowledge that comes through the practice of self-healing. And Geshe Lobsang Pinde said, "Oh, wow, you are so lucky." Because normally when it's explained, only the symbolism is explained. No one gives you the meaning. So the visualization is explained in the minimum details, and the you know the tripod of the three heads, the hearth, and the skull cup, the five meats, the five nectars, the the Katvanga, the Oma Hum, but what it all means, um, the people need to wait years and years and put little pieces together like a puzzle to understand what it all means. Instead, Rinpoche himself said that certain things in our modern context, if we don't give the opportunity to explain what's behind the symbolism, then it'll all get lost. So Rinpoche, in his great compassion and wisdom, he gave us these tools, and I understood the practice of self-healing, the greatness of it, the vastness of it, the depth of it. It's very interesting. When I was in Tibet in Tashi Lumpo studying the Tantra of Guya Samadra, the generation and the completion stage, Kedrup Rinpoche, the disciples. Sorry, I was able. Yeah, sorry. One of these commentaries by Kedrup Rinpoche, a disciple of Lama Tsongkhapa, I was able to understand these things because thanks to self-healing. So I say this because if you want to understand self-healing better, go and study Tantra in a traditional way. Because if you go and read commentaries on generation and completion stage at Guya Samadra, for example, then you understand the practice of self-healing much better. And at the same time, self-healing is like a key that opens up all the doors to to Tantra in its traditional form. It's really something that on one side we do it in a simple way, lightly, and Rinpoche wanted there to be many, many different levels of practice. So that purification of elements can be just that moment where we're purifying our elements, we're balancing our elements, or we're actually generating bliss and emptiness. It really depends on. And that's also why Rinpoche made this practice so that it can adapt to the needs and the levels of each practitioner. So it's time for our dedication. Tomorrow, during the practice, so I'm sorry. So tomorrow we will give more emphasis on the purification of the elements when we actually do the practice, and then we will explain during teachings the emptiness.
Losan tempe drume sasumgi, drove munsel takto negurchi, kewa kuntu yanda lama dang, dralme chuki pela longchu chin, sadan lamgi yunte rapzone, dorje changi kopa nyurtobo sho, nimo dele tsendele, Nime kuyan delek shi, ninsen takto delek pe, kuncho sumki chingilo, kuncho sumki ngodrup tsol, kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Trashidile. So that we will see each other in 12 hours and 5 minutes. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.